Some feelings don't have a name, but you know them the moment you feel them. It's that specific moment when you're sitting with people you know, people you've known for a while, and something inside you quietly asks, do they actually want me here? Not dramatically, not loudly, just a small, cold thought that passes through your mind like a shadow. And then it's gone. But it came, and it wasn't the first time. That feeling has a name. Psychologists refer to it as the experience of feeling unwanted. And it is one of the most quietly painful things a human being can carry. Not because it's overwhelming, but because it's constant. Because it doesn't stop you from functioning. It just sits underneath everything. Underneath the conversations. Underneath the laughter. Underneath the perfectly normal surface of your daily life. And the strange thing is, people who feel this way rarely look like they feel this way. From the outside, they seem fine. They show up. They contribute. They ask how you're doing, and they genuinely listen. They're often the most reliable people in the room. But inside, there is always a small part of them watching, measuring, waiting for the moment when everything confirms what they already suspected, that they are tolerated, not truly wanted. So where does this come from? Because this feeling doesn't appear from nowhere. It has a history. It almost always begins in early experiences, in childhood or adolescence, in moments where a person repeatedly felt overlooked, where attention was inconsistent, where love felt like something that had to be earned, not freely given. Maybe they were compared to others and always came up slightly short. Maybe their feelings were dismissed so often that they learned to stop expressing them. Maybe they were simply never quite sure where they stood with the people who mattered most. And the brain is an extraordinary learner. It takes these repeated experiences and draws a conclusion. Not a spoken conclusion, not a conscious decision, but a deep, structural belief that slowly becomes the lens through which everything else is seen. The belief says, I am not someone people naturally want around. I have to prove my value. I have to earn my place. And once that belief is formed, it is very difficult to unsee. This is what psychologists call a cognitive filter. And it is one of the most powerful patterns the human mind can develop. Because once the filter is in place, neutral situations stop being neutral. A message left on read becomes, they're tired of me. A canceled plan becomes, I wasn't really a priority. A moment of silence becomes, I've already said too much. The mind is not trying to hurt you when it does this. It genuinely believes it is protecting you. It thinks that if it can predict rejection early enough, it can help you avoid the full pain of it. But what it actually does is trap you in a version of reality that may not even be true. And here is where something interesting begins to happen. Because people who feel unwanted don't usually respond by becoming cold or difficult. Quite the opposite. They often become some of the most giving, most attentive, most quietly devoted people around. They remember the things others forget. They notice when someone is having a hard day. They show up without being asked. They give more than they receive, almost always, and they do it without complaint. But underneath all of that giving is something they rarely say out loud. A hope that if they are useful enough, caring enough, present enough, maybe then their place will feel secure. Maybe then the quiet fear will finally quiet down. Maybe then they will feel genuinely wanted, not just tolerated. The problem is that belonging built this way never feels like real belonging. It feels like performance. And performance is exhausting. And it still doesn't answer the original question. So the fear stays. And sometimes it grows heavy enough that the person starts to pull away before anyone else can. They stop reaching out first. They create distance without fully understanding why. They tell themselves they don't mind being alone, even as every part of them is aching for connection. This is not coldness. This is self-protection. This is what a person does when they have been hurt enough times that closeness itself starts to feel like a risk. Psychology has a clear explanation for this pattern. It is deeply connected to how we form attachments in early life. When a child grows up in an environment where closeness was unpredictable, where the people who were supposed to want you could withdraw their warmth without warning, the nervous system learns to stay on guard. It learns to scan every interaction for early signs of rejection. It learns to treat ambiguity as danger. Because in the original environment, that was the safe strategy. The problem is that the strategy travels into adulthood, into situations where it no longer applies. And this is one of the most painful parts of feeling unwanted. It doesn't just hurt. It actively prevents the very connection that would heal it. The more a person fears being unwanted, the more they guard themselves from closeness. And the more they guard themselves, the more isolated they become. The feeling feeds itself, and the person in the middle of it often cannot see a way out. But here is something important, something that the feeling itself tends to hide. The feeling of being unwanted is not the same as the reality of being unwanted. These are two completely different things. And the mind that has been shaped by old pain can become so fluent in the language of rejection that it starts reading it into situations where it simply isn't there. Think about the people in your life right now. Some people notice when you're not around. People who think of you without a reason. People whose days are quietly better because you exist in them. But the filter makes this evidence hard to receive. The mind explains it away. It finds a reason why it doesn't count. It says, they're just being polite. They would feel the same with anyone. It minimizes every piece of evidence that contradicts the original belief, and it amplifies every piece of evidence that confirms it. This is not a flaw in your character. It is a flaw in a belief system that was formed before you had the capacity to question it. The brain learns something in a specific context at a specific time in your life, and it has been applying that lesson ever since, long past the point where it still makes sense. What changes this is not a single moment of realization. It is not simply deciding to feel differently. Real change here is slower. It happens in the gap between what happens and what your mind immediately concludes about it. It happens when you learn to pause in that gap and ask, is this actually true, or does it just feel familiar? Because familiar and true are not always the same thing. The brain that learned to feel unwanted can learn something else. Not overnight, not easily, but with the same adaptive ability that formed the original pattern. Because the mind is never truly finished learning. The beliefs that were written early can, with time and the right experiences, be slowly rewritten. It requires relationships that are consistent enough, warm enough, and patient enough to offer the mind a different kind of evidence. Evidence that accumulates quietly, over time, until the filter becomes just slightly less dense than it used to be. And if you are someone who has lived with this feeling, who has sat in rooms full of people and wondered quietly whether anyone truly wanted you there, then there is something you should understand about yourself. The depth of that fear is a direct measure of how much connection matters to you. People who don't care about belonging don't suffer over it. The pain you carry is not weakness. It is the pain of someone for whom human connection is enormously important, who simply learned too early that it might not be available to them. That lesson was not the truth. It was a wound that became a worldview. And wounds, given the right conditions, can heal. You are not someone who needs to earn their place in the room. You never were. The people around you, the ones who laugh at your jokes and text you back and make space for you in their lives, they are not doing you a favor. They are doing what people do when someone matters to them. And you matter, not because you proved it, not because you made yourself useful enough, but simply because you are here and because you are you. The feeling hasn't learned that yet, but it can.